The city was bustling with the usual afternoon noise and the sidewalks were packed with people rushing to their next appointments, but one man was moving slower than the rest, trying his best to be invisible. He wore a worn-out leather jacket and boots that had seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, but he did not care about his appearance. All he wanted was a quiet moment away from the cameras and the flashing lights that followed him everywhere. He turned a corner and spotted a small diner. With a flickering neon sign in the window, it looked like the kind of place where time stood still and nobody cared about celebrity gossip or movie premieres. He pushed the heavy door open and a small bell chimed above his head announcing his arrival to the room. The smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon greeted him instantly. It was a comforting smell that reminded him of simpler times before his life became a whirlwind of red carpets and interviews. He walked towards the back of the restaurant. Sliding into a booth that was tucked away in the corner, the vinyl seat was torn in a few places and the table had a few scratches, but it felt perfect to him. It felt real and grounded, which was exactly what he needed right now. He sat there for a moment, just looking out the window, watching the world go by, feeling the weight of his long day slowly lifting off his shoulders. A young woman who worked there walked over to his table with a notepad in her hand. She looked tired, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun and her uniform was a little wrinkled from running around all day, but she had a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She did not look at him with shock or recognition like most people did. She just looked at him like he was a normal human being who needed a meal, which was a refreshing change of pace for him. She asked him what he would like to order in a friendly voice that suggested she was happy to see a new face even though she was clearly exhausted. He scanned the menu quickly, not wanting to take up too much of her time, and decided on something simple and comforting. He ordered a black coffee and a BLT sandwich with extra mayo. She nodded and scribbled it down on her pad, telling him it would be right up before turning around and heading back to the kitchen. He watched her go, noticing how she stopped to clear a table that was not even hers. On the way, she moved with a purposeful energy despite her obvious fatigue. He admired that kind of work ethic. It reminded him of his own humble beginnings before the fame and the fortune took over his life. While he waited for his food, he let his mind wander, thinking about the script he was supposed to be reading later that night. It was a heavy drama with a lot of emotional dialogue, and he was feeling a bit overwhelmed by the pressure of getting it right. He took a deep breath and tried to push those thoughts away, focusing instead on the simple pleasure of being in a noisy, normal diner. The waitress returned a few minutes later, carrying a plate that was piled high with food and a steaming mug of coffee. She set it down in front of him, carefully making sure not to spill anything, and told him to enjoy his meal. The sandwich looked perfect. The bread was toasted to a golden brown and the bacon was crispy, just the way he liked it. He took a bite and closed his eyes for a second, savoring the taste. It was delicious in a way that expensive catered food rarely was. It tasted like care and effort. He ate slowly, enjoying the quiet rhythm of the diner. Around him there was an older couple in the corner sharing a plate of pie and a few businessmen having a heated debate about stocks. It was peaceful and he felt his shoulders relax more with every bite. He drank his coffee, feeling the warmth spread through his chest, and for a little while he forgot that he was one of the most famous actors in the world. He was just a guy eating lunch. When he was finished, he wiped his mouth with the napkin and leaned back. Feeling satisfied, he reached his hand into his jacket pocket to grab his wallet to pay the bill. His fingers touched the lining of the pocket but nothing else. He froze for a second, thinking he must have missed it, so he tried the other pocket on the left side, but that one was empty too. A cold knot of panic started to form in his stomach. He patted his jeans pockets frantically, hoping he had just shoved it in there without thinking, but they were empty as well. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he had left his wallet on the entryway table at home. When he grabbed his keys in a rush to get out of the house, he felt his face start to burn with embarrassment. This was a nightmare scenario for anyone, but for him it felt even worse. He knew that people watched him constantly and he did not want to be the guy who made a scene or tried to use his fame to get out of paying a bill. He looked up to see if the waitress was nearby so he could explain the situation, but she was busy. Refilling the salt and pepper shakers at the counter, he sat there for a moment trying to figure out what to do. He could call a friend to bring him money, but that would take forever and it felt ridiculous to make such a big deal out of a simple lunch. He took a deep breath to steady his nerves and decided to just be honest and hope for the best. He looked over at her and caught her eye, giving her a small awkward wave to signal that he was ready for the check. She walked over with a friendly smile. Wiping her hands on her apron, she asked him if everything was okay with the meal and if he wanted any dessert. He looked up at her, feeling very small and ashamed in that moment. He told her in a quiet voice that the food was amazing, but he had a problem. He admitted that he had forgotten his wallet at home and did not have any way to pay for the sandwich right now. He braced himself for her reaction, expecting her to smile, to drop away, or for her eyes to narrow with suspicion. He expected her to call the manager or maybe even ask him to leave the restaurant. He had seen how people treated others when they made mistakes, and he knew that kindness was often in short supply in the big city, especially when money was involved. But what happened next completely surprised him and shifted the atmosphere of the entire interaction. She did not look annoyed or angry. She did not roll her eyes or sigh with frustration. Instead, her face softened with understanding. She looked at him with a look of genuine empathy, as if she had been in that exact same position before. She told him not to worry about it, saying that happens to the best of us and that it was really not a big deal. She waved her hand dismissively, as if the thought of being upset over a missed payment was silly to her. She told him he could pay her back whenever he happened to be in the neighborhood again, or she could just cover it for him this time, since it was just a sandwich and not a big ticket item. She spoke with such sincerity and lack of judgment that he felt a lump form in his throat. He was used to people wanting things from him or expecting him to be perfect, but here was a stranger who worked long hours for her money, offering to help him out of a jam just because it was the decent thing to do. He looked at her, trying to find the right words to express how much her kindness meant to him, but he found himself speechless. For a moment he realized that this was not about the money, it was about the connection and the grace she was showing him. In a moment where he felt vulnerable, he sat there stunned by the simplicity and purity of her gesture, feeling a renewed sense of hope about the world and the people in it as she smiled and turned away to clear another table, leaving him with the bill face down on the table and a feeling of warmth in his heart that had nothing to do with the coffee. He could not believe what he was hearing. The air in the small diner seemed to shift around him as her words sank in. She was not angry, she was not rolling her eyes, she was simply being kind in a way that he had almost forgotten existed in this busy city full of people who always wanted something in return for their help. He looked at her face, searching for any sign of sarcasm or annoyance, but there was nothing there, only a genuine warmth that made his chest feel tight. He felt a strong urge to fix the situation right away because he did not want to take advantage of her generosity, even if it was just a few dollars. It was the principle of the thing. He reached for his wrist and unclasped the watch he was wearing. It was a nice watch, certainly worth more than the sandwich and the coffee combined. He held it out to her across the table, telling her to please take it as collateral until he could come back with the cash. He thought this was a fair solution, a logical way to settle the debt and ensure she did not lose out on her hard-earned money because of his mistake. The waitress looked at the watch resting in his open palm, and then she looked back up at his eyes with a gentle smile on her face. She shook her head slowly and pushed his hand away with her own soft hand. She told him that there was no need for that. She said that she could tell he was good for it and that holding his watch would make her feel like she did not trust him. She explained that she had been in his shoes before, rushing out the door without her purse, and how stressed she felt when a stranger had helped her out. She said it was her turn to pay it forward. He was completely taken aback by her logic. It was so rare to meet someone who valued trust over material things, especially in a city where everyone was guarded and suspicious of strangers. He slowly lowered his hand and put the watch back on his wrist, feeling a bit foolish for offering it, but mostly feeling a deep respect for this woman he did not even know. He asked her again if she was sure, and she laughed, a light sound that seemed to cut through the noise of the diner. She said she was positive and that he should enjoy the rest of his day without worrying about a lunch bill. He sat there for another moment looking at her, trying to memorize her face because he knew he would never forget this interaction as long as he lived. He realized that this was not just about money, it was about dignity. She had given him back his dignity in a moment where he felt small and helpless. She did not treat him like a celebrity or a customer who was a nuisance. She treated him like a friend. Finally he nodded and stood up from the booth, feeling a bit shaky but also incredibly light. He pulled a crumpled napkin from the dispenser on the table and asked her for a pen. She handed him one from her apron pocket. With a curious look on her face, he wrote down her name carefully, making sure to spell it right so he would not forget it later. He told her that he was going to remember this and that he would be back very soon to settle the score. She smiled and told him she was counting on it. Then she turned and walked away to help an elderly couple who had just walked in, leaving him standing there by the table. He watched her walk away, noticing how she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders but still moved with a spring in her step. He took a deep breath and put on his leather jacket, feeling the cool air conditioning hit his skin. As he walked towards the door, the bell chimed again. As he pushed it open and stepped out onto the busy street, the noise of the city traffic rushed back to him, horns honking and people shouting, but it all seemed far away. His mind was still back in that quiet corner booth. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at his reflection in the diner window. He looked like the same man who had walked in an hour ago, tired and wearing worn-out clothes, but he felt different on the inside. He felt restored by a simple act of grace. He hailed a taxi and climbed into the back seat, giving the driver his address, but his thoughts were still with the waitress. He wondered how many people she had helped over the years without ever asking for anything in return. He thought about how easy it is to be kind, yet how rare it actually was. He made a silent promise to himself that he would not just pay her back the money for the meal, he would find a way to show her how much her small gesture meant to him, because she had no idea who he was or what he could do, but that did not matter to her. She just saw a person who needed help and she stepped up without hesitation. The taxi moved through the streets smoothly, but he barely noticed the scenery passing by outside. His mind was racing with ideas on how to repay her kindness. He could have sent a check in the mail or had an assistant drop off the money later, but that felt too impersonal. She deserved better than that. She deserved to see him face to face again, to know that her trust was well placed. He decided that he would go back the very next day, no matter how busy his schedule was, because he wanted to look her in the eye and thank her properly for treating him like a normal human being. Inside the diner, the waitress cleared the table where he had been sitting, wiping away the crumbs and stacking the dishes onto her tray. She looked at the empty spot for a second, thinking about the strange handsome man who seemed so sad when he realized he forgot his wallet. She hoped he would come back, not for the money but just to see him smile again. She carried the dishes to the kitchen window and dropped them off for the busboy to wash. The cook asked her if the guy was going to pay, and she nodded, saying he would be back tomorrow because he seemed like an honest man. The cook laughed and shook his head, calling her too nice for her own good, but she just shrugged and went back out to the floor to refill coffee cups. She did not know that her decision to be kind would set off a chain of events that would change everything, but for now she was just happy to have made someone's day a little bit easier. As the afternoon turned into evening, the diner started to fill up with the dinner crowd, but her mind kept drifting back to the man in the corner booth. There was something about him that was familiar, but she could not quite place it. Maybe he was an actor or a musician, she thought, but she did not really follow celebrity news, so she was not sure. It did not matter anyway. He was just a person to her, and that was how she liked it. She continued working hard, taking orders and serving food with a smile, unaware that her life was about to take a turn she never expected, all because she chose to cover a $12 lunch bill for a stranger. The day went on and the sun eventually went down, casting long shadows across the city streets while the waitress finished her shift. She was tired, her feet hurt from standing all day and her back was sore from carrying heavy trays, but her heart felt light. She thought about the look of relief on the man's face when she told him not to worry about the bill. It was a small thing really, but it made her feel good to know that she could make a difference even in a small way. She clocked out and gathered her things, saying goodbye to the cook and the other staff members. As she walked out the door, she took a deep breath of the cool night air and started walking towards the bus stop. She did not have much money for a cab, so she had to take the bus home, but she did not mind. She was used to it. She thought about what she would make for dinner when she got home, maybe just some eggs and toast since it was late and she was tired. She did not know that across town the man she had helped was thinking about her too and planning a way to change her life forever. He sat in his living room looking at the napkin with her name written on it, feeling a sense of determination that he had not felt in a long time. He knew that he had to act fast and he had to do it right because people like her were rare and they deserved to be protected and cherished. He looked at the woman in front of him with a new sense of respect. She was standing there with her hands on her hips, looking at him as if he was crazy for trying to give her his watch as collateral. She told him again that it was really not necessary and that he should just enjoy the rest of his day. He felt a lump form in his throat because it had been a very long time since anyone had done something nice for him without expecting something in return. Usually people wanted a photo or an autograph or a connection to someone famous, but she did not care about any of that. She just wanted him to have a good meal and go home with a smile on his face. He finally nodded and put the watch back into his pocket, realizing that arguing with her would only ruin the moment. He told her that he would be back very soon to pay her back, and she just smiled and said she knew he would be because he looked like an honest man. With that, she turned around and walked away to go check on another table, leaving him standing there alone in the booth. He watched her for a moment as she cleared a dirty table and wiped it down with the rag. She moved with a grace that surprised him considering how tired she looked. He felt a strange sense of peace wash over him as he gathered his things and put on his jacket. It was a small interaction, just a few minutes of his life, but it felt heavier and more important than the movie premieres or the interviews he had done lately. He walked towards the door, feeling the eyes of the other customers on him, but he did not care this time. He pushed the door open and the little bell above it chimed again, signaling his exit. He stepped out onto the busy sidewalk and the cool air hit his face, helping to clear his head. The city was loud and chaotic with cars honking and people rushing past each other, but he felt calm in the middle of the storm. He flagged down a taxi and climbed into the back seat, giving the driver his address. As the car merged into traffic, he stared out the window, watching the buildings blur past him. His thoughts kept drifting back to the diner and to the kind waitress. He wondered what her life was like outside of that small place. He wondered if she had a family or if she was struggling to pay bills like so many people in the city did. He felt a sudden pang of guilt knowing that she had spent her own hard-earned money on his lunch. He knew that tips were how she made her living and that giving up even a few dollars was a sacrifice for her. It made him realize how out of touch he had become with the reality of normal life. He lived in a world where money was never an issue, where lunch was just an afterthought, but for her it was time and effort that she would never get back. He promised himself that he would make it up to her. He did not just want to pay her back for the sandwich, he wanted to show her that her kindness had a ripple effect, that it had made a difference in his day more than she could ever know. He arrived at his home and walked inside. The silence of the big empty house felt different tonight. It felt less lonely and more comforting because he carried the memory of her smile with him. He took off his jacket and hung it up, then walked over to the desk where he kept his important papers. He pulled out the napkin he had tucked away earlier and looked at the name she had written down for him. He stared at the handwriting for a long time, thinking about how he could repay her kindness in a way that was meaningful but not overwhelming. He did not want to embarrass her or make her feel like she owed him something now. He just wanted to say thank you in a way that respected her pride. He decided that he would go back the very next day. He would bring enough cash to cover the bill and a very generous tip, because he knew that money could not buy the grace she had shown him, but it could maybe make her life a little easier for a while. He spent the rest of the evening working on his script, but his mind kept wandering back to the diner. He found himself smiling as he read his lines, feeling a new energy that he had been missing lately. The next Morning. He woke up early feeling a sense of purpose that he had not felt in a long time. He got dressed and made sure to put some cash in his wallet along with the rest of the money he intended to give her. He wanted to be prepared. He did not want to have to run to an ATM or make her wait again. He grabbed a cup of coffee to go and headed out the door. The weather was nice with the sun shining bright overhead, which put him in an even better mood. He decided to walk to the diner instead of driving so he could enjoy the fresh air and clear his mind. As he walked, he thought about how strange life was, that a chance meeting in a random diner could change his entire perspective. He had been feeling down and stressed about his career, but now he felt hopeful and connected to the world again. It was amazing how a little bit of kindness could go such a long way. When he finally reached the street where the diner was located, he slowed his pace. He did not want to seem too eager or make a scene. He just wanted to walk in like a normal customer and find her. He stood across the street for a moment watching the people go in and out of the restaurant. He saw the sign flickering in the daylight and felt a sense of anticipation building in his chest. He took a deep breath and checked his pockets to make sure he had everything he needed: the napkin with her name, the money, everything was there. He stepped off the curb and crossed the street, dodging the traffic as he went. When he reached the door, he paused for a second to compose himself. Then he pulled the door open and walked inside. The bell chimed again just like it had the day before, and the smell of bacon and coffee greeted him warmly. He scanned the room looking for her familiar face. The diner was busier than it had been the day before, with the lunch rush in full swing. He saw her moving quickly from table to table carrying a large tray piled high with food. She looked busy and a little stressed, but she was still smiling at the customers. He felt his heart rate pick up a little as he watched her work. She was pouring coffee for an older man and laughing at something he said. She really seemed to care about the people she was serving. He stood near the entrance for a moment, not wanting to interrupt her while she was working. He just wanted to watch her for a minute and appreciate the hard work she was doing. It was clear that she was the kind of person who put her whole heart into everything she did. Finally she looked up and spotted him standing there. Her eyes widened in surprise and a huge grin spread across her face. She put down the coffee pot and started walking towards him, wiping her hands on her apron. As she came, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. Seeing her smile again, he knew that he had made the right decision to come back. He was ready to make things right and maybe even make her day a little bit brighter. In return, he took a step forward to meet her in the middle of the diner, ready to finally settle the debt and show her just how much her simple act of kindness had meant to him. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away as they got closer to each other, and for the second time in 2 days he felt a genuine connection with another human being that had nothing to do with his fame or his fortune. It was just two people sharing a moment of mutual respect and kindness in a busy world. Next day when he walked back into the small diner, the atmosphere was completely different from the quiet afternoon he had experienced before. The sun was high in the sky and the lunch rush was in full swing, creating a chaotic energy that filled every corner of the room. The noise level was intense, with the sound of plates clattering together, glasses chiming, and dozens of conversations happening all at once, blending into a loud roar. The air smelled strongly of fried food, coffee, and cleaning solution, a sharp contrast to the relaxed vibe of his previous visit. He stood near the entrance for a moment, just observing the scene, looking through the crowd to find the woman who had helped him. He spotted her almost immediately near the kitchen window, carrying a tray piled high with plates that looked dangerously heavy. She was moving with a hurried pace, weaving through the tight spaces between tables, trying not to bump into any of the customers. Her hair was escaping from her bun and her face was flushed with exertion, but she was still managing a polite smile for everyone she passed. Seeing her working so hard made him feel a renewed sense of respect for her, and also a twinge of guilt for adding to her workload the day before. Even though he knew she would not see it that way, he waited for a break in the flow of customers, and when she finally had a moment to breathe, she turned around and saw him standing there. Her tired face lit up with a look of pleasant surprise, and she started walking towards him, wiping her hands on her apron, probably assuming that he was there to quickly hand her some cash for the meal and leave. He could see that she was expecting a standard transaction, a brief exchange of money and a goodbye, but he had something else entirely in mind. He greeted her warmly and asked if she could possibly take a short break with him. She looked around the crowded room anxiously and shook her head, telling him that she was sorry but she could not possibly leave the floor right now because her tables were full and the other waitress was on a lunch break. She explained that she was swamped and did not have a single minute to spare. He nodded, understanding her position perfectly, and told her not to worry because he had already spoken to the manager and got permission to steal her away for just a few minutes. She looked over at the counter where the older manager was indeed watching them and giving a nod of approval. Her eyes widened in surprise and she hesitated for a moment, torn between her work ethic and the rare chance to sit down, but finally the exhaustion won out and she let out a small breath of relief. She led him over to the same corner booth where he had sat the day before and slid into the seat opposite him. It felt strange for her to be sitting on the customer's side of the table after running around for hours. She slumped slightly in the seat, closing her eyes for a second to rest them before looking at him with a curious expression, wondering why he had asked her to sit down. He did not waste any time with small talk. He reached into the inside pocket of his leather jacket and pulled out a crisp white envelope that was thick enough to draw attention. He placed it on the scarred table between them and slid it over to her using 2 fingers. She looked down at the envelope and then back up at him, her forehead furrowed in confusion. She reached out to touch it but hesitated, not sure what to expect. He told her that inside was not only the money for the meal but a little something extra as a thank you for her kindness the day before. She smiled, thinking he probably left a very generous tip, maybe $50 or even $100, which would be a huge help to her. She picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of it, which was much heavier than she anticipated. She carefully broke the seal and pulled out the contents. When she saw what was inside, her breath caught in her throat and her hands began to tremble slightly. It was not just a tip, it was a stack of high-denomination bills, more money than she made in several months of working double shifts at the diner. She stared at the money in disbelief, her eyes darting back and forth between the cash and his calm face. She tried to push the envelope back towards him, shaking her head vigorously and telling him that she could not accept this, that it was far too much money for a simple lunch. She stammered that she did not help him because she wanted a reward and that taking this felt wrong. He reached out and gently stopped her hands, pushing the envelope back towards her on the table. He looked her in the eyes with an intensity that made her stop talking. He told her that she had to listen to him for a moment. He explained that the day before, when he admitted he had no money, he was in a very dark place mentally and that her reaction had saved him in a way he did not expect. He told her that he was used to people judging him or trying to take advantage of him, but she had treated him with basic human decency and respect. He said that her refusal to make him feel small had given him back a piece of his dignity that he had been missing. He explained that the money was not a payment for the sandwich, it was a gesture of gratitude for restoring his faith in people during a time when he really needed it. He told her that he watched her working today, running around taking care of everyone else, and he knew that life was a struggle for her. He said he wanted to be the person who took care of her for a change. She sat there stunned by his words, processing everything he was saying. She realized that this was not about charity, this was about connection and the ripple effect of kindness. She looked at the envelope again, seeing it not just as money but as a tool that could change her life. She thought about her rent that was overdue and the classes she wanted to take and the family she supported. She realized that accepting this gift was not a weakness but a way to honor the kindness she had shown him. Finally she nodded slowly and pulled the envelope towards her, holding it close to her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Tears welled up in her eyes and spilled over, running down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She looked at him and whispered her thanks, her voice thick with emotion, telling him that he had no idea how much this meant to her and that she would never forget this moment as long as she lived. He smiled at her, a soft, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and told her that she deserved every bit of it and much more. They sat there for a few more minutes, While the diner bustled around them, ignoring the noise and the rush, forming a quiet bubble of understanding and mutual respect, he asked her about her dreams and her family, listening intently to her answers, treating her stories with the same importance that anyone would treat a famous celebrity. He learned that she was putting herself through school and that she wanted to be a nurse one day. He listened to her talk with passion about helping people, realizing just how fitting that was for someone with such a naturally kind heart. When the manager finally signaled that her break was over, she stood up feeling lighter than she had in years, not just because of the weight of the envelope in her pocket, but because she felt seen and valued by another human being. She thanked him one last time and turned back to work, her step springier and her smile brighter than it had been all day. He watched her go, knowing that this was not the end of their interaction, but the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. He felt a profound sense of satisfaction knowing that her simple act of grace had been returned tenfold and that he had been lucky enough to be the one to do it. She walked out of the diner that afternoon with the heavy envelope tucked safely inside her apron pocket, feeling like she was carrying a secret treasure that could change her entire life. The sounds of the city seemed different to her now, less like an overwhelming noise and more like a background music to her suddenly hopeful future. She did not take the bus like she usually did because she was afraid of losing the envelope, so she walked the long way home, clutching her pocket every few seconds to make sure it was still there. When she finally got to her small apartment, she locked the door twice and leaned against it, breathing hard. She walked over to her small kitchen table, which was cluttered with bills and overdue notices, and carefully emptied the contents of the envelope onto the scarred wood surface. Her hands were shaking as she looked at the pile of cash in front of her. It was more money than she had ever seen in one place. It was more than enough to cover the rent that she had been stressing about for months. It was enough to pay off the utility bills that had been piling up and threatening to shut off her lights and water. It was even enough to cover the cost of her textbooks for the upcoming semester. She sat there for a long time, just letting the reality sink in. Tears streamed down her face and dripped onto the table, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude instead of exhaustion and despair. She felt a huge physical weight being lifted off her shoulders, a weight she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be light and free. Over the next few days she made careful and smart decisions with the money. She went to the landlord and paid everything she owed, ensuring she would not be evicted. She paid off the credit card debt that had been haunting her for years, and she even found a safer apartment in a better neighborhood where she did not have to worry about break-ins or loud neighbors keeping her awake at night. Moving was a tiring process, but every box she packed felt like a step towards a new beginning, a step away from the fear and struggle that had defined her life for so long. She still worked at the diner because she enjoyed the work and her co-workers had become like family to her, but the desperation was gone from her step. She smiled more easily and laughed more often, surprising even the regular customers who had known her as the quiet, tired girl with the sad eyes. A few weeks after the envelope incident, the manager called her into his office early one morning before her shift started. She was worried that she had done something wrong or that he was going to cut her hours now that she seemed to be doing better, but when she walked in he was smiling and holding a piece of paper. He told her to sit down because he had some news that would shock her. He explained that he had received a very interesting phone call from her famous friend, the actor she had helped the day he forgot his wallet. He told her that the man had called specifically to talk about her work ethic and her dreams. The manager said that the actor had been very impressed by her dedication and her kindness, and that he wanted to help her achieve her goal of going to nursing school. The manager handed her the paper, which was an application for a specialized scholarship program that was usually reserved for people with high-level connections. It was a full-ride scholarship that would cover her tuition, her books, and even her living expenses for the entire 4-year program. She stared at the paper in disbelief, reading the words over and over again, trying to process that this was really happening to her. The manager explained that the actor had made a few phone calls and pulled some strings to make sure she was considered for this opportunity, and that The acceptance letter was practically guaranteed if she just filled out the paperwork and sent it in. He told her that the actor had told him she was a special person who deserved a chance to shine. She took the paper with trembling hands, thanking the manager profusely, but he just waved her off, telling her that she deserved it and that he was proud to know her and to be a small part of her journey. She left the office that day with a new sense of purpose, not just surviving day to day but actually building a future she could be proud of. She enrolled in classes and found that she excelled in her studies, fueled by the memory of the kindness she had been shown and the desire to one day help others in the same way. She studied late into the night in her new safe apartment, never forgetting where she came from and always keeping the napkin with her name on it tucked away in a drawer as a reminder. The story of the lunch and the envelope never made it to the tabloids or the evening news. No one outside of the diner and her close friends knew that one of the biggest movie stars in the world had changed her life with a simple act of generosity. She never sold her story to a magazine or posted about it on social media for likes and comments because it felt too sacred and private to share with the world. It was a moment of grace that belonged to her and the man in the booth. She knew that if the media found out, they would twist it into something ugly or sensational, and she wanted to protect the purity of what had happened between them. Sometimes late at night when she was studying thick medical textbooks, she would think back to that rainy afternoon when he walked in looking so lost, and she would smile knowing that she had made the right choice to trust him and to be kind without expecting anything in return. He had returned that kindness 1,000 times over, giving her not just money but hope and a future she never thought possible. Years passed and she graduated at the top of her class, eventually becoming a nurse who was known for her patience and her care. She often spent extra time with patients who were scared or alone, just as she had been when she waited tables. She carried the spirit of that day forward into her work every single day, never forgetting the lesson she learned in that small diner, that we are all just human beings doing our best to get by, and that a single act of kindness can ripple outwards and change a life forever. And somewhere across the city, the actor continued his life carrying the quiet memory of the waitress who treated him like a normal man and not a celebrity, a memory that warmed his heart on lonely days and reminded him of the goodness that still existed in the world. They never met again in that diner, but their paths crossed in the invisible web of human connection, a true story of unasked for generosity that changed everything without the world ever noticing. The magic that happened in a corner booth over a sandwich and a cup of coffee.